You're listening to Soap Dirt, the latest in television entertainment news.
Hey there, B&B fans. I've got a special treat for you today. I want to talk about 7 bold and the beautiful characters that never should have been killed off. These are tragic deaths, and it was kind of hard to limit this to just 7 characters because there have been so many kind of lost over the years. And Bold and the Beautiful is largely not a soap that resurrects people and bring them back. They've done it with Taylor. They did it with Macy. And who else did they do it with? I'm trying to think. But it's not the common thing they do. Most of the time, if somebody dies on Bold and the Beautiful, they stay dead. Sheila Carter. That was the other one. That was a big shocker when they brought her back from the dead. All right. So I'm going to lay these out for you. And if I didn't touch on a character death that you want to talk about, definitely drop it in the comments and I will check it out. I love reading your comments. I appreciate you guys commenting. Before we dig in, if you haven't already, please reach down, click subscribe so you don't miss any of our B&B updates. Let's dig in. So if you don't remember, there were 2 Carolyn Spencers on Bold and the Beautiful, and both of them died. And I'm including them both, even though one of them died off screen, but it was still really, really sad. So the 2 Carolines actually were both married to and deeply loved by Ridge Forrester. And one of them was also loved by his son, Thomas. I'm going to start with OG Caroline. I'm going to call her Caroline Spencer Sr. Okay. Just to differentiate. The older Caroline Sr., was the half-sister of Dollar Bill Spencer. She was played by Joanna Johnson from 1987 up until the character's death in 1990. She later, they revealed, had a twin named Karen Spencer that they brought on with the same actress in 1991 because fans really missed her, but they didn't want to undo her tragic passing from leukemia. And if you don't recall, Caroline was considered by many, and even still today by many, to be Ridge's true soulmate and love of his life, not the Destiny person. So if you do not recall, Brooke was very jealous of Ridge's love for Caroline, and she meddled and interfered to try and keep them apart. And when Caroline caught her at her dirty deeds, she blackmailed Brooke to get her away from Ridge. And not long after Ridge married Caroline, and this was back in the Ron Moss days with Ridge, she found out she had leukemia. And at the time, Dr. Taylor Hayes, then played by Hunter Tylo, was her oncologist. And she swore the doctor and Brooke to keep the secret of her cancer. But in the end, Brooke did not keep her mouth shut, and she blabbed to Ridge anyway. Caroline Spencer threw herself a big goodbye party, and then she died in Ridge Forrester's arms in 1990, and it was so darn sad. She returned in 2001 as a ghost, and then in 1991, because fans missed Joanna Johnson so much, they invented her twin, Karen Spencer, with a retcon and brought her back for a bit. Karen Spencer is still alive. All right, now we're going to talk about Caroline Spencer Jr., which is Caroline Sr.'s niece. Caroline Jr. is the daughter of Karen Spencer, her mom's twin sister. Okay. Just if you guys have been watching for a while, this won't be confusing. If you're a newer watcher, yes, 2 with the exact same name, and they both had the same husband, weirdly. If you do not recall, Caroline II was played by Linsey Godfrey, who's now over on Days of Our Lives. She was married to Rick Forrester first, and then Ridge Forrester, and was also involved with Thomas Forrester at the time of her death. She was the daughter of Caroline's twin, Karen. She was a designer at Forrester Creations, and Rick and Thomas were both into her. That was back in the Pearson Faudet days when he was playing Thomas and Jacob Young was playing Rick. Caroline was quite the schemer while chasing Rick, but then things kind of changed for her. After Bill Spencer had Justin shove Ridge out of a helicopter trying to kill him, Ridge had brain damage. This was in the Thorsten Kaye era as Ridge by the way. And he couldn't draw very well because of issues with his hands. Does that remind you of a plot that's going on right now with Aly Forrester? Tell me they don't recycle plots. So Caroline was helping him draw, and them touching hands had sparks flying. She divorced Rick, and she and Ridge began their romance. Rick was really mad. He actually tried to shoot them both in a fit of rage. And then she wanted a family. Ridge couldn't give that to her, but he still wasn't telling her the truth about his vasectomy. So she took some anxiety pills. She had something to drink. Thomas knocked on her door. He didn't know that she had taken the pills and that stuff, and they slept together, and she wound up pregnant with Douglas. She went ahead and married Ridge, and then Ridge pressured her to keep the baby from Thomas and to say that he had fathered the child, even though they both knew he was biologically incapable of fathering a child because he didn't have any swimmers. Caroline did not like the lie, but Ridge was very heavy-handed and insisted, kind of like we're seeing him heavy-handed right now with other things. Anyway, Caroline and Ridge split, and she took the kid and left town, but then she later came back for Thomas. They set up that plot so to facilitate Pearson Foday's exit as Thomas. Ironically, Bill Spencer had convinced Thomas that Caroline was dying to reunite them for his own selfish reasons. And Thomas and Caroline left. They went to New York together. They eventually got romantically involved, I believed. But then off screen, Caroline died instantly from a blood clot. And then they recast Thomas with Matthew Atkinson, and they brought him back to Bold with his young son, Douglas Forrester. So that was a sad death because of what it meant for Douglas, and it kind of pushed Thomas off the deep and dark end for a long time, but it did happen off screen. The rest of the deaths that I'm going to talk about that were tragic and too soon all happened on screen. I've got a mother and daughter to talk about, Darla Einstein and Aly Forrester. They passed away in 2006 and 2015. Both of these tragedies occurred at the side of a road. So Darla's death was super sad, and even more so because it led to another character death, that of her daughter Alexandria Forrester, aka Aly. And you might remember that Darla was played by Schae Harrison, and she was OG Sally Spectra's assistant at Spectra Fashions. Not the new Sally, but the older Sally, played by the always excellent Darlene Conley. So Darla dated several guys back in the day, but then things got really interesting when she slept with an upset Thorne Forrester. That was back when Windsor Harmon was playing the role. Thorne was drunk the night they slept together. He actually didn't realize he'd bedded Darla, but then she turned up pregnant, and he was supportive. She named their baby Alexandria after Macy Alexander, I believe. And then things got even more interesting, and they fell in love and they got married. But then tragedy struck. On the night of their daughter Aly's birthday party when she was younger, Phoebe Forrester called. She needed help with a flat tire. Darla took the call, and she went to help her out. But it was a really foggy night, and Taylor, that was played by Hunter Tyler back then, was driving around in the fog looking for her daughter Phoebe. Darla was struggling to loosen the last lug nut, and when she was loosening it, she kind of went careening backwards into the road, and Taylor's car hit her. She had this really devastating head wound that killed her a little while later at the hospital. Thorne was there with Darla when she passed away. And then several years later, when their daughter Aly was a teen, she was suffering mental health issues, and part of it was about the loss of her mother. Darla was back as a hallucination, asking her daughter to avenge her by killing Steffi. And then Aly and Steffi ended up at this roadside scene. Aly attacked Steffi with a tire iron, and in the scuffle, she fell and she hit her head on a rock. Steffi called 911. EMTs tried to revive Aly, but it didn't work, and Thorne was completely crushed by his daughter's death. Both of those were sad, sad deaths. Another really sad death was Storm Logan. This was back in 2008. It was particularly awful because he took his own life, but he did it for selfless reasons. He was trying to save his little sister Katie Logan's life. If you are a newer B&B devotee, you might not know that the three Logan ladies had an older brother. So Storm has been dead for 15 years now, but for a few years back, they invented a daughter for him, Flo Fulton, or Felony Flo, as I like to call her. They decided to make baby-selling Flo Storm's kid as part of this retcon attempt to redeem her. As far as I'm concerned, Felony Flo is irredeemable. I do love Katrina Bowden. I like her as an actress. She played Flo, but I did not like her character on B&B, and I think based on what she did, no thanks. So I'm glad she's gone and she can stay that way. By the way, Storm was his nickname. He was technically Stephen Logan Jr., named for their dad, Stephen Logan Sr., played by Patrick Duffy. So Storm was a lawyer, and he was always watching out for his little sisters. He was played by William DeVry at the time of his death. He represented Taylor when she was facing charges for Darla's accidental death. Storm could be pretty volatile. He once shot OG Stephanie Forrester for causing his sister Brooke to be raped. So he was uber protective of his sisters. And I think he had that gun in his hand and he was talking to somebody about what had happened. And then Katie Logan came in the room and startled him, and he turned around and he accidentally shot his little sister right in the heart. All right. So she was just about to die. They had her like in the emergency room. There was no heart transplant available after this traumatic injury. Plus, Storm was facing prison for shooting not only her, but Stephanie Forrester. So he decided to shoot himself at the hospital. He shot himself in the head, right in the hospital, so that Katie would get his heart. And there were a few more appearances after he passed away. Storm came back a few times as a ghost to visit the little sister who got his heart. And Storm's heart is still beating in Katie's chest to this day, but it was still a terrible tragedy. Also, same year, 2008, but much later that year, Phoebe Forrester died. This was Steffi's twin, who was played by Mackenzie Mozzie, and they were fraternal twins, by the way, not identical. Phoebe raised eyebrows when she was dating Rick Forrester, who was played by Kyle Lowder, also over at Days of Our Lives, at the time of her death. Rick and Phoebe were both Forresters, but they were not blood related. But because they had the same last name and close family ties, although not blood ties, it was kind of icky. But you know how Bold does icky stuff like that all the time. Phoebe, back in the day, was a model and a singer. And Phoebe and Rick broke up when she caught him in bed with her mom, Taylor. Yes, it's true. She pulled something kind of like what Brooke pulled, but at least Taylor didn't turn up pregnant. So then Rick tried to hook up with Phoebe's twin, Steffi, too, and they kissed. Both of these were deal breakers for Phoebe, and she actually blamed his longstanding jealousy against Ridge for the way Rick was behaving. Phoebe was furious at him. She got in the car with him, and then they were arguing. She didn't have a seatbelt on. She was physically fighting him while he was driving down the road. They crashed. She was thrown out of the car and like down a slope, kind of into a ravine thing. Ridge, played by Ron Moss at the time, arrived on the scene, and he was absolutely horrified to see what happened to his daughter. And he got there in time for her to die in his arms. And the Forresters and the fans were absolutely furious that she had been taken from us so young and so soon. So awful, awful. All right. The very last death I want to talk about, and of course you may have already guessed who it is, because you can't talk about tragic deaths on Bold and Beautiful without talking about Stephanie Douglas Forrester, who died in 2012. You know that song, Save the Best for Last? Yep, that's what I'm doing, because what's more tragic or sad than the death of Forrester matriarch Stephanie? Since her passing, we've heard both Brooke and Quinn trying to pass themselves off as the Forrester matriarch, but there is no replacing the OG. And just a quick side note before I talk about the sad, sad death of Stephanie, all of these characters that I'm talking about that have passed away, just as a matter of record, all the actors that played them are still alive and well. All right. So if you haven't already, please reach down and click subscribe so you don't miss any of our updates. Definitely click a like if you are appreciating this look back at history. So now let's talk about Stephanie's passing. Susan Flannery was ready to retire after 25 years on B&B with her characters scheming, plotting, loving, and hating. And so they wrote her this epic and tragic exit. Stephanie was written out at the request of the actress so that she could depart the CBS soap opera and retire. So what they did for Stephanie was they diagnosed her with end-stage lung cancer. It had spread and she declined treatment. They had her die outside in the sun, in the fresh air, up at the Big Bear cabin. The strangest part for a lot of fans was that she died peacefully and lovingly in the arms of her longtime rival, Brooke Logan. And that was the way Susan Flannery wanted it. She said that Stephanie going out that way with Brooke there was just, quote, so right. Queen Stephanie passed away more than a decade ago of terminal stage 4 lung cancer. She was married to Aly Forrester at the time that she passed away. And then to honor his late wife, that was when Eric put up the portrait. And that's the same portrait that would occasionally fall off the wall when he kissed a woman or there was another woman in the house thinking that she was the matriarch. Of course, Brooke had her picture up on the wall for a while. Quinn did too. But now there's one of Eric up there over the fireplace since it's his home. Although for me, frankly, I still miss seeing Stephanie Forrester's judgy face looking down on them from above. Hey, drop your comments below on which of these deaths hit you the hardest, or if there was another one on B&B that hit you harder, drop it in the comments. I love reading your comments. I read them all. Thank you so much for tuning in to this special B&B video. This has been Belynda from Soap Dirt.
Thank you for being a loyal listener. Follow us wherever you get your podcast, because you don't want to miss the next episode. Soap Dirt is on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.